Hey, welcome to Mike's Trains, and thanks for joining me for the next video in this series. We're going to continue along with the roundhouse, building the concrete pad. And as you can see here, I've cut all the pieces that we talked about in the last video. And the only reason I'm showing all this is just, I want to just point out a couple of things. These are the strips that go between the rails, okay? These go on the outside tracks of the roundhouse. These are the pieces that go along the roundhouse. This goes in front of part of the building between the roundhouse and the turntable. There's another section in front of that building that I haven't cut yet, and there's a reason for that, and we'll get to that probably next week, because there's some work that has to be done before I can do that piece. But these right here, what I've done with these is I cut them all to size. I cut the templates like I showed you. I used paper and I made the templates. And then what I did after that was I took a palm sander and I sanded the tops of all of these and went over them all for two reasons. And the reasons being, number one is I wanted to thin down the styrene just a little bit, because it is very close to the height of the railheads, and I want it to lay below the railheads a bit. And the second reason being is I want to add some texture to these pieces, and I used a 120 grit sandpaper on the palm sander, and I went over them. So it's not a huge, rough surface, but it is not shiny smooth. And you also want to get rid of the gloss of the styrene before you paint them. So, a few different reasons, but that's why I sanded them. And like I said, it's going to give me a little bit of texture because I want this to look like concrete. And, obviously concrete outside isn't going to be glass smooth. It's going to have a little bit of texture to it. So, what I've done now after that is I came in with some painter's tape and I made a strip or several strips of painter's tape, which made a sticky pad for me to stick all these parts to so that I can paint them. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to paint them in my spray booth, and I'm going to paint them with Model Master paints, these right here. This is the color I'm going to use. It's concrete color, and we're going to spray these down, and then I may go over that with a little bit of very super thin black just to darken them up along the edges on some of these, the edges that meet the rails. So I'm going to try and bring this to the spray booth and see what happens. I don't know if I have enough light for the cameras and enough room for a camera in there, but I'm going to give it a try and we'll see what happens. Alright, so the spray booth didn't work out so well. It was not enough lighting to really show you anything. But here's what we ended up with. The pieces are all sprayed. I sprayed them with the concrete color, and then I took some very super thin black and I did the edges. All the outer edges that border up against the tracks. So there's a track, both of these, all these little pieces here border up against tracks. And then these pieces are in between the rails down the center. So I did the whole piece of that. I just did a light coating of the thin black as well. And that toned down the concrete color. But you can see I left it brighter out here where there's nothing really going on. It's just regular concrete. And then I took out my pan pastels here, and my little sponge, and then I went down the centers just to tone and blend a little bit better like this. And then down the center of the concrete in here, down all of these. And this is what we end up with. So now you've got the idea that the locomotives are rolling over this, and you know, things come off, and you know, dirt gets on there, and but further away towards the center of all these pieces, further away from the tracks, it would get cleaner and cleaner. So that's my thinking here. And oh, and also there's a nice little texture to these, very light texture, but nonetheless it is there. It's not totally smooth. It's very nice, actually. I really do like it. So now it's time to go get these installed. Oh, also, all of these pieces here, especially these smaller ones, I numbered the backside right here so that I know which space this piece was specifically cut for, because they can vary a slight bit. I mean, I'm not a machine or a robot, so things can vary a little bit. So for my own thing, I cut each one specifically for each spot, so each one of these is numbered for a specific spot. Same with these pieces here. You know, this one's kind of obvious, it's cut for the building. This one too, kind of obvious. So why don't we head downstairs and start putting these in. Alright, so I showed you all the painted pieces upstairs, and I got kind of carried away, and I came down and I installed them all onto the layout. I didn't show you how I did it. It's actually really simple. All I did was put a little bit of CA right along this lip here, and then down the edges of the track. I was going to use caulk, but I kind of feel like that would have taken too long to dry. So I used the CA. Now the only thing left to do is that I cut the styrene so that it hangs just over the edge of this, and I'm going to sand and cut this back right to the edge of the hole of the turntable here. And then that'll be done. And the only thing left is to paint the yellow stripe that goes right around the edge here. Now you will notice that I have a part here, right here. This piece I didn't put in. And there's a reason for that. This piece right here is tied to, obviously, this track right here. And this is the track I kind of wanted to talk about. And when I first put this track in, I actually got a comment from Mike Pfeiffer, who told me that this looked too tight of a curve to run a locomotive through. And when I put this in, I didn't run a locomotive through there. I was pushing train cars through, and they went through just fine. But after all this was in and all, I started running the locomotives through here. And yeah, Mike, you were right. They don't, it's a little too tight for the locomotives. They won't quite do it. I would need to stretch this out further down in the back down there and bring it out, but because this other track is in the way, I can't get the amount of space that I need, and it's the curve right in here that's the problem. So what I'm gonna do, and I have to do this before I add in this section of the concrete pad here, is I have to cut this back. Okay, so this is the other side of that same track behind the roundhouse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that track off right here, and we're going to remove all of this permanently. And then I'm going to loosen all this track up back to this set of feeders over here. Yeah, all the way back to here, and I'm just going to nudge this track inward to come more like this, and I'm going to bring it right into here. And it's gonna end right over here. Now I did consider putting a turnout back here and running two tracks in here, but I don't really want to deal with that. I think we're just going to do it like that. I'm just going to bring the one single track and end it right up over here as sort of a storage out of the way track for I suppose maybe an RIP track. I don't know what you would call it, but I think it ends up being a good thing back here. And then we'll put another concrete pad out here and end up with some of this track in that, you know, just in this general area right here. And that's how we'll deal with that. So anyway, that's the whole of what this is going to look like. I think it came out pretty good. I'm happy with it, and not going to change it. I think that's just what I need. As well as down in the back, way down there, there's a garage door. So we're going to make a small area back there. This right here is going to be a parking area, sort of like an employee parking area. Then the only other place we want to add more concrete area to would be over here. These doors right here and these doors right here. So we need to have some sort of a pad in here and something here. So I may cover this whole area, come out here, and then across like this, and then maybe back up like that. This whole area like that. We may do something like that. Yeah, so anyway, if you're watching me for the first time, thanks for finding me, and thanks for sitting down for the video. Glad you could join me. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. Love to have you along for the ride, and you know, hanging out for a little while with me every week. If you haven't seen my website, it's mikestrains.wordpress.com, and over there are photos that I put up of the stuff that I have going on here. When I finish a project, I usually take a lot of photos of it, and you know, so you can get a chance to see a little more detail of what's going on. And by all means, you can subscribe over there as well. If you do subscribe, you'll get an email update whenever I add pictures and things, because I don't always announce that stuff. You'll get an email update when I do, so that you'll be up to date and know what's going on. So until next time, happy modeling.